Hello, aspirants, and welcome. If you've been following the news, you've seen the images, worker protests on the streets, at factory gates. Now, this is more than just a current affairs headline. It's a really deep economic trend, and it's absolutely crucial for your GS Paper 3 preparation. So today, we're going to dissect this weakening of trade unions in India, and more importantly, what it means for inclusive growth. Let's dive in.
You know, this image from Noida, it really sets the stage, doesn't it? We're seeing more and more of these agitations over things like minimum wages and job security. And for you, this isn't just a news photo, it's a direct link to your syllabus. Remember that topic, inclusive growth and issues arising from it? Well, to really get a handle on these events, we have to go to the root cause, the decline of union power.
Okay, so here's our plan for this explainer. We'll kick things off with the current context, then we'll journey back in time to look at the pre- and post-1991 eras. After that, we'll diagnose the decline from two very different perspectives, see how it's impacting workers, and then get into the big debate around the new labor codes. And we'll wrap it all up with a sharp focus on how this connects to your mains and interview prep.
So, the big question is, why should this be at the very top of your preparation list right now? Well, it's because the issues you see in the news every day, the demands for a fair wage, the protests against contractual work, they are all symptoms of a much bigger problem. And that problem is the weakened bargaining power of the Indian workforce. For your exam, this is a classic case of connecting economic policy with real on-the-ground social outcomes.
Right, and to really understand what's happening today, we have to look back. You can think of the story of trade unions in India as a tale of two very different eras, but the economic reforms of 1991 being the great dividing line.
This timeline really shows a dramatic shift. Before 1991, in the era of dirigisme, that's just a term for a state-controlled economy, unions, they had real clout, especially in the public sector. But after the LPG reforms in 91, the whole game changed. The economy opened up, and things like outsourcing and flexible contract work started to become the norm, chipping away at the very foundation of union power.
So why did this happen? Why exactly did the unions lose so much of their power? This is a fantastic area to explore for a nuanced mains answer, because there isn't just one simple reason. There are two major schools of thought here, and it's important you know both. Let's break them down.
Okay, let's look at the two sides of this debate. First, you have the internal factors argument. This view, put forward by thinkers like Kingshuk Sarkar, suggests that unions basically weakened from within. They became fragmented, divided by political ideologies, and crucially, they focused only on the permanent staff, pretty much ignoring the huge, growing mass of contract workers. But there's a whole other perspective. This one points to external factors. Thinkers like Freddie K. Thazath argue that you have to look at the post-1991 economic onslaught. The dominance of finance capital, privatization, outsourcing, these forces, they argue, systematically broke down the large organized industries where unions used to be strong.
And this quote from Freddie Thazath, it just perfectly captures that second viewpoint. The argument here is that the decline wasn't just about the behavior of the unions, their choices or their mistakes. No, it was a phenomena-based outcome, a result of massive, systemic economic shifts that changed the very structure of our labor market. All right, so we've looked at the why. Let's now shift to the consequences. What has been the actual, tangible impact of this deunionization on the average Indian worker? Well, the numbers, they tell a pretty stark story. Just look at this number, 6.3%. That's it. That is the percentage of the entire Indian workforce that is part of a union today. It's a really stark figure, and it just drives home how limited that collective bargaining power really is on the ground.
And when you break it down further, the picture becomes even clearer. In the public sector, the rate is 11.8%. I mean, it's still low, but it's something. But now look at the private sector, it's a tiny 1.8%. This huge gap tells you exactly where the erosion of union power has been the most severe.
And this is a crucial point for your answers. The very goal of negotiation has shifted. It's a massive change. Unions used to fight for a living wage, right? Enough money for a worker and their family to have a decent standard of life. Now the fight has become defensive. The struggle today is often just to get the legally required minimum wage. It's a major downgrade in their bargaining power. Okay, let's now turn to the most recent big development in this story, the 4 new labor codes. The government presents them as a much-needed reform, a solution, but critics argue they could actually make the situation worse for workers and unions. It's a big debate. And this table here shows a really critical change. Under the old law from 1926, any 7 workers could come together and form a union. Just 7. The new codes, they raise that bar significantly. You now need at least 10% of the workforce. So imagine a factory with 1,000 workers. That means you need 100 people just to start. And on top of that, the mandatory supervision by the Labor Department seems to be gone, which raises some serious questions about oversight.
Now, here's a term you absolutely must know for your exams: fixed-term employment. The new codes formalize this. It allows companies to hire workers directly, but only for a fixed contract period. Now, on the one hand, this could cut down on the exploitation by middlemen contractors, which is a good thing. But on the other hand, it basically makes temporary work the new normal, and that erodes the long-term job security that was once the bedrock for a strong, unionized workforce.
All right, let's bring all of this together now. We need to focus on how you can actually use this analysis in your exams. This synthesis part is what really fetches you those extra marks.
So remember these key takeaways for your answers. First, the 1991 reforms, that's your watershed moment. Second, always present both the internal and external reasons for the decline. That shows a balanced understanding. Third, directly link deunionization to the rise of informal and contract work. And of course, be prepared to critically analyze the new labor codes. Most importantly, frame your entire argument within that larger syllabus theme of inclusive growth.
And we'll leave you with this final thought. It's a potential high-value question for your mains or even your interview. How do we strike that balance? As future policymakers and administrators, this is the complex challenge you will face. How to reconcile the push for economic growth and ease of doing business with the constitutional promise of dignity and fundamental rights for every single worker. It's something to really ponder on. All the best.